Hey everybody, and Tony here with my review of Verdi's Simon Boccanegra with conductor Yi Chen-lin, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. This marks the third time I saw Vasily Barkatov's production of Verdi's Simon Boccanegra at the Deutsche Oper Berlin because I wanted to see and hear Jorge Puerta sing the role of Gabriele Adorno. Jorge Puerta was a tenor who sparked my interest, and with good reason. His versatile repertoire was something that was boasted for quite some time. And as soon as I heard about him, I knew that this was a tenor I was going to look out for. His roles spanned from the likes of the small yet important roles of Normanno from Lucia de Lammermoor, as well as the first armed man from Mozart's Die Zauberflöte, to the standard tenor repertoire from the lyrical Rodolfo from La Bohème to more challenging roles such as Radames from Aida and even Calaf from Turandot. After I heard Senor Puerta sing the role of Gabriele Adorno, I was quite impressed with how much he was able to give with this particular role. First of all, I loved his timbre. It's sufficiently warm and it had sufficient passion to make this role come alive, complete with youthful ardor as well as some amount of virility, given that Gabriele Adorno is the tenor hero. I also loved the way that he was able to take advantage of chiaroscuro, as I was able to hear some really good chest tones accompanied by some good coordinated head voice, and he was able to coordinate chest voice and head voice in a solid manner to the point where I saluted him for his vocal laudability. All in all, Jorge Puerta was a natural full lyric tenor who had sufficient passion in his voice, who had vocal warmth, and who had a very good technique that managed to keep him on stage for quite some time. While I do have glowing praises for Jorge Puerta's sturdy technique, as well as the sufficient virile warmth that he was able to produce thanks to his natural full lyric tenor voice, I was missing that piercing, katana-like, sharp and strong, let alone incisive quality that I love in many a spinto/dramatic tenor. Whenever I think of voices who sing Gabriele Adorno, I not only think of the likes of Carlo Bergonzi or Giuseppe Campora, I also think of Gianfranco Cecchelle, Franco Corelli, Giacomo Lauri Volpi, Beniamino Gigli, and all those great Italianate tenors of the past, and lest I forget about Enrico Caruso and Giovanni Martinelli, just to name a few of those awesome tenors of the past. With Jorge Puerta, I thought he was lacking in that sword-like piercing quality whenever he reached the high notes, which was a shame because this was a tenor who not only boasted such a strong and versatile repertoire from the lyrical roles of Rodolfo and Alfredo from La Traviata to the more dramatic roles of Calaf and Radames, but he also had a sturdy technique that backed him up, and I really would have loved for him to let his voice out more and just to let that voice of his ring throughout the theater, complete with that sword-like and masculine quality that I love in many a spinto/dramatic tenor. And there were also occasions where I thought that his wings were being clipped because maybe he was a bit under the weather and maybe it was not really his night, despite it being the final performance. But whatever the reason, I do hope that he does get better with time, and I do hope that he continues to sing on the world's greatest opera stages, because that is a voice right there that has sturdiness and a fine warmth to it that makes him a naturally fine lyric tenor singing all of these wonderful roles. I do have one condition for him. I do hope that Jorge Puerta remains conscientious with his choice of repertoire because he does have a naturally fine instrument with sufficient polish as well as sufficient warmth. And if he dares take on too many roles too quickly and too soon, he might risk damaging what natural beauty he has in that full lyric tenor voice. And this is a tenor I would love to continue seeing on stage because he is a fine and skillful musician, and he does have the strong and versatile repertoire to prove it. I just hope that he continues to remain wise with his choices and not let his naturally beautiful lyric tenor voice burn out. Therefore, I hope Jorge Puerta continues to develop his technique in the right way, continue to build up on those strong high notes that are so necessary for any tenor to possess. And here's also hoping that he will continue to remain as conscientious and cognizant as ever with what roles he chooses to sing throughout his career. The material that he has with his naturally beautiful lyric tenor voice is there, and I do hope that he does not abuse it because, as I stated before, Jorge Puerta's voice is naturally beautiful. I would still love to hear it grow in strength and virility, but I also hope that he continues to remain wise with his choice of roles so that he can have a long-lasting career that could last for ages. Dong Juan Lee really managed to steal my heart as Simon Boccanegra, and I was really excited to see him portray the title hero because this was a baritone I saw grow from singing these superb character parts, especially that of Monterone from Rigoletto, to doing more leading male roles. And with Simon Boccanegra, I thought that this role was a perfect fit for him. Yes, he may not have the voluminous, cyclone-like muscular strength of Gian Giacomo Guelfi, let alone the pathos and the chestiness that Ettore Bastianini and Coronel McNeil had, the complete strength and wonderful musicality that Lawrence Tibbett had, let alone that emotive quality that I loved in Tito Gobbi, as well as the strengths that many of the great Italianate baritones of the past possessed, such as Tita Ruffo, Riccardo Stacciari, Giuseppe Scandola, Giuseppe Faldengo, Giuseppe De Luca, Giovanni Ingeleri, and Giuseppe Taddei. But what Mr. Lee had was warmth in terms of his characterization and his vocal production, as well as sufficient fullness to make this role come alive. And he definitely had that Verdi baritone fullness, although not at the level of my personal favorites, Gian Giacomo Guelfi and Lawrence Tibbett. Nevertheless, his voice was full, it had richness, it was wobble-free, and it had sufficient chestiness. And while I do miss that sheer vocal power that I loved in many dramatic baritones of the past, I still have to give Dong Juan Lee credit for what he was able to accomplish. Not only did he have sufficient power, but he also sang Simon Boccanegra with enough sensitivity and warmth in his voice to the point where he was able to act quite well with not only his voice, but also his body and his mannerisms. He did a fine job with the title hero of Simon Boccanegra. And here's also hoping that he continues to tackle more dramatic baritone roles, because I do feel that this is the direction Mr. Lee deserves to remain in. I would love to see him as Macbeth. I'd even love to see him as Rigoletto, Giorgio Germont, and even Le Comte de Nevers from Les Huguenots and Nelusco from L'Africaine. And let's also not forget about Carlo Gerard from Andrea Chenier and Tonio from I Pagliacci. The possibilities for Dong Juan Lee are absolutely endless, and he proved to be a fine musician, as he's always been, in the role of Simon Boccanegra. So I have to give him so much kudos for a job laudably done, and he was able to use his strengths to his advantage to create a sufficiently stirring performance as the title hero. Returning as Jacopo Fiesco was Ante Ercunitsa, and he did sing a lot better than when I first heard him sing Jacopo Fiesco last week. However, there were occasions where I still felt that he was holding back when he had to sing the more dramatic parts, especially at the end of the opera. But regardless of whatever issues I had with Ante Yarkunitsa as a singer, I thought that he was still able to be committed with his role as a singing actor as Jacopo Fiesco. And as I stated before, he does not come even close to my personal favorite Jacopo Fiescos, and those include Jerome Hines, Cesare Siepi, Nikolai Gyaurov, and Evgeny Nesterenko. But at least he was able to act the role well, and even though I still have major issues with his woolly tone, wobbles, tremolos, and other inconsistencies of his voice, despite projecting well throughout the theater, and even whatever drawbacks he had when he had to let it all out, I still have to give him some amount of credit for having enough commitment to really sing this role and not bark it out. Returning as Paolo Albiani was Michael Baghdadze, and although he was able to give a committed characterization of this villain, as in he made him slimy and opportunistic and just as much of a sleazeball, albeit not too overt about it, I thought that his vocal production was still nasal, masky, woolly, and just overall problematic. Yes, he does sing everything, from the low notes to the high notes, but it's not a voice that I would go crazy for in terms of roles such as Paolo Albiani. I'll say this once and I'll say this again. There have been many great baritones, let alone great bass baritones, who have sung this role, and those include Leonard Warren, Cheryl Milnes, and of course, one of my personal favorites, Justino Diaz and Jose Vendome. How Michael Baghdadze compares to these singers, he falls really short because of that buzzy tone that he has, and even singing almost too much in the mask, which is a total shame because Michael Baghdadze naturally has a strong repertoire that shows that he has been singing these dramatic baritone roles for quite some time. However, when it came to his vocal production, it still left a lot to be desired, and I still hope that he eliminates any form of masky nasal singing and fully commit to singing in the pharynx so that his voice can fully bloom and be a lot richer. So while I am not crazy about Michael Baghdadze's voice, especially as Paolo Albiani, I still have to give him credit for his theatricality of what he was able to accomplish by making this villain come alive, complete with that slimy sleazeball attitude, which he managed to do well. Once again, Patrick Rowan was a strong bass baritone as Pietro. What he was able to continue to accomplish with Pietro was using his sufficiently plush bass baritone voice to make this otherwise thankless character come alive, complete with virility, as well as that slight underling characterization that he had. And while bassos such as Norman Scott continue to be my personal pick for Pietro, I still have to give major props to Patrick Rowan for bringing his fine and full bass baritone voice to life to make this thankless character come to life, as well as sing well, free from wobbles. But I also hope that he continues to strengthen his vocal resources, because those vocal resources do exist, but he definitely needs to dig in deeper so that his tone will become a whole lot richer and fuller. Stealing the show once again with her blazing top notes was Maria Motolghina as Amelia Grimaldi, aka Maria Boccanegra. What more can I expect from Miss Motolghina? She was a thoroughly committed singing actress, and this time she sang with a whole lot more nuance from when I first heard her in the role barely 2 weeks ago, let alone 1 week ago. Her commitment as a singing actress cannot be paralleled, and how she was able to use that beautiful voice of hers was laudable. Yes, she could be stronger with her chest tones. She could be a whole lot fuller with them, let alone continue to develop them in the right way so that her voice can continue to ring throughout the theater, let alone last for many years to come. But with a fine instrument that Maria Motolghina possessed, I cannot wait to see what the future still holds for her. Because as I stated before in the previous video, her technique was rock solid, but I'm sure that with further strengthening and with further polishing and sharpening, she will definitely be on her way to be a superb full lyric / lirico spinto soprano. Despite the issue I had with Kieran Carell's nasality and maskiness, he was still able to do a serviceable job as the captain of the guard, but I really do hope that he gets rid of that nasality and maskiness, because there is a fine lyric tenor right there who also could do character parts, and I do hope that he does not squander his talents anytime soon. And I still have to give major props to Ariana Manganello's lovely maidservant. So overall, the singing, especially from Jorge Puerta and Dong Juan Lee, was really great, but I have to give major kudos to Maria Motolghina for continuing to be such a major trooper. She jumped in for Florina Stucchi 2 times, and interestingly enough, Florina Stucchi was supposed to sing Amelia Grimaldi, aka Maria Boccanegra, for the remaining run of Simon Boccanegra. But for whatever reason, she was indisposed, and Maria Motolghina took over for the remaining performances. So I have to give my hat off to her for what she was able to accomplish as Maria, aka Amelia. And while I do have my issues with Ante Erkunitsa and Michael Bartadze, I could still tip my hat off to them for what they were able to do as singing actors, although I would have loved to have a lot more consistency in their voices. And I definitely have to give my hat off to Patrick Rowan for making the thankless role of Pietro come to life with sufficient virility, as well as what Kieran Carell and Ariana Manganello continue to offer in the very small roles. But more than anybody, aside from Maria Motolghina continuing to show promise, as well as living up to that promise, I still have to give my hat off to Jorge Puerta and Dong Juan Lee for their stirring performances of Gabriele Adorno and Simon Boccanegra, respectively. The conducting done by Yi-Chin Lin was meticulously done. There were occasions where she kind of dragged the orchestra, but overlooking those scratches, I thought she was consistent with her conducting and how she kept the orchestra together with briskness and sufficient interest to make us, the audience, excited for what was to come. And you can always rely on the chorus and orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin to make any and every performance an exciting one, and one that could be a night to remember. So I definitely have to salute Jorge Puerta for what he was able to accomplish as Gabriele Adorno, despite whatever issues he had as a singer, despite the occasions where he had his wings clipped in a figurative manner. I really do hope that he continues to take advantage of his naturally beautiful full lyric tenor voice, because that is a voice right there that can sing for many years to come. And I also do hope that he continues to strengthen his technique in the right way, as well as develop those sword-like top notes, because the potential for him to grow as a singing actor is there. His warm tone, his sufficient virility as a singing actor, and the natural beauty that he has in his voice are all there. He just needs to keep on polishing said technique and really strengthen his voice to sing with more clarity, more expressiveness, and more virility. I also have to give mad props to Dong Juan Lee for bringing such a stirring performance as Simon Boccanegra, but from all the performers, Maria Motoligina deserves my utmost kudos, not only for stepping in for Florina Stucchi 2 times, but for continuing to deliver a consistently strong performance as Amelia Grimaldi, aka Maria Boccanegra. And for those of you who saw Verdi Simon Boccanegra at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what'd you think of it? Did you really like Jorge Puerta as Gabriele Adorno, let alone as a fine full lyric tenor? Was there another singer who stole his thunder, whether it be Dong Juan Lee as Simon Boccanegra or Maria Motoligina as Amelia Grimaldi, aka Maria Boccanegra? Or did you feel that the singing was not to your liking? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's it for my review of Verdi Simon Boccanegra starring Jorge Puerta as Gabriele Adorno. Tune in tomorrow for hopefully my review of Beethoven's Fidelio, also at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. So until then, good night everybody.